On Sunday morning, while J.D. Vance was literally landing in Switzerland to sit across from Iranian negotiators and try to save a peace deal signed just 5 days ago, a United States senator went on national television and told the world that he expects those talks to fail, and then explained exactly what comes next. If this deal fails, President Trump is going to take the Strait of Hormuz over by force. That's Lindsey Graham, Republican senator from South Carolina. Self-described Trump ally, man who spent 4.5 hours with the President of the United States on Friday, 2 days ago. Speaking on CBS's Face the Nation, Sunday morning, June 22nd, while the peace negotiations he was describing were actively happening in a Swiss mountain resort. The United States will control the Strait of Hormuz, will charge a fee for all those who go through to pay for the operation. And then, in case you thought he might dial it back, if Iran contests control of the Strait of Hormuz by the United States, we will obliterate them. Obliterate, not respond firmly. Not take appropriate military action. Obliterate. A sitting U.S. senator, describing what a sitting U.S. president plans to do to a sovereign nation if diplomatic talks fail, used the word obliterate on national television. And the talks hadn't even started yet when he said it. Let's step back and actually take stock of where we are right now, because the speed of this story is making it hard to follow, and that confusion is working against you. 5 days ago, Wednesday, June 17th, Trump and Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian signed a memorandum of understanding at the Palace of Versailles. Champagne, celebration, ships of the world, start your engines. Trump called it historic. Gas prices dropped below $4 a gallon. The world let out a collective sigh of relief. Within 48 hours, Israel launched airstrikes in southern Lebanon that killed 18 civilians. Iran said those strikes violated the deal, which calls for a halt to military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Iran suspended the Switzerland talks that were supposed to start Friday. Vance's plane never left the runway. The Strait of Hormuz, which had briefly reopened, was announced by Iran on Saturday to be closing again. Trump posted on Truth Social, threatening to hit Iran very hard again, just like we did last week, only harder. And Graham went on television Sunday morning and told America to brace for the U.S. military to seize a major international waterway by force. That's the 5-day arc of the greatest peace deal in history. Now, to be fair, and the full picture actually matters here, Vance did land in Switzerland on Sunday. He, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner sat down with Iran's parliamentary speaker and Foreign Minister Abbas Araki at the Bergenstock Resort near Lake Lucerne. That's a real face-to-face meeting between senior officials from both sides, and the fact that it happened at all, despite the chaos of the past 72 hours, is not nothing. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright went on Fox News Sunday and said 67 ships passed through the Strait of Hormuz on Saturday, up from 55 the day before, and that traffic is flowing quite nicely. Trump himself told Fox News that 19 million barrels of oil left through the strait on Saturday. So despite Iran's announcement that they were closing it again, actual ships are still moving, actual oil is still flowing, and American military escorts are still doing their job. But here's the thing. The gap between what's happening on the water and what's being said on television should terrify every thoughtful person watching this unfold. Ships are moving. And simultaneously, a U.S. senator who just spent 4.5 hours with the president is publicly predicting the deal will fail and describing a military takeover of an international waterway as the next step. These two things can't both be true for long. Either the diplomacy is real and Graham is just venting, or Graham knows something about where Trump's head actually is and the diplomacy is theater. And Iranian President Pezeshkian made something very clear on Sunday that nobody should gloss over. In an address to a banking conference in Tehran, the same day talks were beginning in Switzerland, he said Iran would never back down from its right to enrich uranium. Never. That's not a negotiating position. That's a red line. The entire point of these 60 days of talks is supposedly to determine the fate of Iran's nuclear program. And the leader of Iran, on the opening day of those talks, publicly announced that Iran will never give up uranium enrichment. So what exactly are Vance and Witkoff and Kushner negotiating in Switzerland right now? Let's talk about the toll road idea, because it deserves more scrutiny than it's getting. Trump floated on Truth Social that if the framework collapses, the U.S. would impose tolls on shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, charging for services rendered as the guardian angel to the countries of the Middle East. Graham confirmed and expanded on this, saying the U.S. would run the strait and charge a fee. Think about what this actually means in practice. The Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway. About 20% of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas passes through it every single day. The countries whose tankers use that strait include China, Japan, South Korea, India, and virtually every major economy that depends on Gulf oil. The idea that the United States would unilaterally seize control of an international waterway and charge foreign nations a toll to use it, that's not foreign policy. That's a shakedown. And every country on Earth that depends on that water, allies and adversaries alike, would have to respond to it. Stinson LLP China alone gets a massive portion of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. Do you think Beijing is going to quietly pay a toll to the United States military for access to waters they've used freely for decades? Do you think Japan and South Korea, American allies who need that oil to keep their economies running, are going to smile and hand over a check? This isn't America being strong. This is America threatening to blow up the rules-based international order that American power was built on, the same system that made the dollar the world's reserve currency, that gave American companies access to global markets, that made American alliances worth having. Graham described all of this, the forced seizure, the toll, the obliteration threat, as the plan Trump laid out during their 4.5 hours together on Friday. 4.5 hours, not a casual conversation. An extended strategic discussion between a president and one of his most hawkish allies, 2 days before negotiations were supposed to begin, during which the apparent consensus was, the deal is probably going to fail. And here's what we do when it does. And now Vance is in Switzerland. And Kushner is in Switzerland. And Witkoff is in Switzerland, sitting across from Iranian officials, trying to negotiate a 60-day framework into something real, while the President of the United States is on Truth Social, threatening to hit Iran only harder, and one of his most trusted Senate allies is on national television calling the whole thing a likely failure and describing a military takeover as Plan B. Is it any wonder Iran's foreign minister walked into that Swiss conference room on Sunday and declined to stand in front of the cameras next to the American delegation? The Iranians declined to stand beside the U.S., Pakistan and Qatar in front of cameras. That's not a small thing. That's Iran telling the world visually, without a single word, that they don't see themselves as equal partners in a mutual agreement. They see themselves as a country under threat, making calculated tactical decisions about when to cooperate and when to withhold. U.S. Department of Justice, here's the bottom line, and it really is this simple. You can't negotiate peace in the morning and threaten obliteration in the afternoon. You can't ask a country to give up its nuclear program while simultaneously having your allies publicly predict the talks will fail and describe military seizure of their strategic waterway as the backup plan. These things are not compatible. Diplomacy requires the other side to believe that reaching an agreement is genuinely in everyone's interest. when a senator who just spent 4.5 hours with the president tells the world the deal is going to fail on the same morning the talks begin, he's not helping the diplomats in Switzerland. He's making their job nearly impossible. 13 American soldiers are already dead from this war. Hundreds more were wounded. Thousands of others, Lebanese and Iranian civilians included, paid with their lives. The Strait of Hormuz briefly reopened and briefly closed again within the same week. And now we're watching a senator who speaks for the president predict failure and promise obliteration, while the VP and the president's son-in-law sit in a Swiss mountain resort trying to talk their way to peace. You deserve to know which of those two things is the real U.S. policy: the Switzerland talks or the obliteration speech, the toll road or the handshake, the 60-day framework or the 4.5-hour war planning session with Lindsey Graham. Because right now, both of them are happening at the same time. And that's not diplomacy. That's confusion dressed up as strategy. If you think Americans deserve clarity about whether we're going to peace or back to war, share this. Drop a comment. Do you think Lindsey Graham is speaking for Trump or freelancing? Because the answer to that question changes everything about what happens next in that Swiss mountain resort.